resources through Health and Human Services, sometimes it might be involving our co-responder team. They might step in and help because there might be an underlying mental health issue that is exacerbating some of the problems within the building. So we have the interdisciplinary approach because we all have different tools in our tool belt, and we want to use the tool that's going to be most successful for that targeted issue that they are. And I mean, it's a wide spectrum of issues that we deal with on a regular basis. And some of them are very minor, but it's the most important thing for the people that live in that building that it's impacting their quality of life. If they have one resident that's really impacting their quality of life, it's really important to them that we come up with a solution that's agreeable to everybody. What was the middle question that I missed?
I knew it was a lot. I think you hit most of it. The accountability, I talked about, some, top 10 lists.
Like the Craigslist of
So,
good
yeah,
landlords.
So something else on that. Talking with Rich Wilkin and Joe Marzigliano recently, I would not have guessed this, but it's anecdotally, it has been Rich's experience and Joe's experience. They actually get a lot more calls from tenants than we would expect because that resource has been provided to them by maybe their beat officer, or during some other interaction with somebody in the building. So I think we get the feedback from the tenants just as much as the landlords are getting it. So I think that's an important kind of feedback loop too, is that if we see a problem, if we think that the tenant's rights are being infringed upon in some way, we can link them up with resources and also then go educate the landlord and say to the landlord, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z, you cannot do these things. And certainly we can get legal involved in those conversations if we need to too. I don't think they've gotten nearly the credit that they should for putting this all together. I know that, a lot has gone into getting us all to kind of work cohesively, so.
Beautiful. I think, anytime, I think the biggest thing too, and I've already heard it, the communication piece. If we don't know that there's an issue, there's no way for anyone to intervene. So I think the more we do explore getting the word out through social media, whatever way that we can do that, residents, if you have issues, you have concerns, this is your mode of operation. Connect, call, do what you need to do.
Absolutely.
And I want to end on a personal story because what? There's, I had two situations. I had residents reach out to me and talk about, an issue that they had with their landlord. And, that person would come back and give me kind of updates and reports, along the way. And in the end, it was a favorable outcome, but it sounded like it was really a deal. This is something that just kind of continued and was ongoing. And, Ms. Mangler, you did your thing. But I heard that there were, it was not uncomfortable, but in the end, the resident felt heard. And I think a lot of times, folks need to feel like their voice is heard and there's some action behind it. The other story I just wanted to share, it was recent, of folks who may be living in, basement or some area where there's not, it's unsafe and not up to standards. But they're, these folks are stuck. Do I report it? Where now, we've exposed, a safe space, for this family who's trying to, do what they can do for their families. I'm wondering, is there a middle ground there, where these situations can be reported? I know there's some law that there's some protection there, but I'm wondering if just your thoughts, on those particular situations.
Sure. It's a sensitive issue, right? We're not looking for somebody to lose their housing arrangements, but we also obviously are concerned in an unsafe environment, right, fire hazards and all sorts of things of that nature. And that's where we would probably go to health for some resources through some of the social services. There's all sorts of connections with the homeless. There's all sorts of organizations out there that can help us if there does need to be some resources to seek those resources. and we would have to get creative in some of those situations.
And thank you for saying that. And for those residents who find themselves in those uncomfortable situations, know it's not always a gotcha. You know, it's, hey, thank you for sharing, so now I know so that I can support and help and connect resources.
Right. Thank you.
Goes back to that problem solving. Trustee Schechter?
Yeah, another question about what's in the ordinance, just wondering what happened. So, you know, and speaking about being heard, one of the things that was built into the ordinance was that if there was an eviction being contemplated, that either the tenant or the landlord could file a written request to a nuisance intervention and prevention committee, or the NIP committee. And I just wonder, has that ever been constituted? Have they ever met? Has that ever been activated?
So I can speak to that. They have met over the last 10 years. A lot of times there was a discussion if there was a problem at a certain property. We would discuss it with Joe Merzigliano, and more times than not, he would reach out to either the tenant or the landlord, and there was a resolution. There has never been, to my knowledge, an eviction based on this.
Trustee Kamani Levy?
I just have one quick, thank you so much for presenting. Chief Barnes and I have briefly chatted about this. I just have one quick question. I received an article, there's an alarming trend of residents being charged egregious move-in fees. Is that part of the training, and could it be part of the training if it's not?
I don't know that it is, but it certainly is something we could add to the mix.
Yeah, or if there's like, I don't know if Skokie has some sort of restriction to charge a deposit fee versus a move-in fee, but making sure that move-in fee, if it is available, that it's not outrageous and egregious, and it is actually being used for something that is helpful to the resident. And thank you so much for, I should have said this earlier, Keith had the same idea about some sort of repository for residents. There's nothing worse than signing a one-year lease to find out that your landlord takes like 2 months to fix a toilet, or there's a noisy tenant upstairs and you're
Sure.
stuck. So I think something like that would be really helpful to residents or tenants.
Thank you.
So what I would say with regard to move-in fees and so forth and so on, you have to realize that a lease is a contract between a tenant and a landlord, and there's only so much intervention that we can do. If these are charges that they are charging, that tenant could ask them to be waived or so forth and so on. We don't regulate that.
So thank you, everyone. This was a great presentation. Great. Oh, I'm so sorry, Trustee Iverson.
This will be quick. And I've witnessed the positive effects of the work that you have all done. And so as a landlord, I'm grateful. The tenants. Yeah, one of you mentioned that when a landlord has a new tenant, they give them some sort of pamphlet or document talking about their rights. Does that document, or do you have a document that you could give them? Because reaching out to tenants is what I'm getting at. There's great ways to get to landlords, but getting to tenants is a little trickier. And that opportunity happens at that moment of signing a lease. And when you're already giving them documents, which surely call out your office, which is a great benefit, if they could also spell out some of their general rights and procedures, as in 2 months to fix my toilet. What do I do? How do I do it? What are the steps? All of these things are covered in the ordinances of our state and of our village, and spelling them out in a concise and easily read document would be of great value to tenants, I believe, and also open up the opportunity to draw them into the community in a way that landlords are already drawn in. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent presentation, good discussion. Before we close, and I see that we have, Ms. Grodnicki maybe would like to address the board, I do want to say one thing first. I'd like to acknowledge that our village manager, John Lockerbie, was instrumental in starting this program 11 years ago. This was John's assignment. And I remember, what were there, John, 16 public meetings? It was a total of 16 public meetings over
18 months.
Yep, 18 months that led to forming this initiative. And it was led by residents. It actually sprang up from the community. So, anyway, good job to all involved.
Thank you.
Public comment? Pardon me? Yes.
Okay, it was about the presentation that we just.
Yes.
saw. How often are the inspections being done on a specific, like, for an individual unit?
For an individual unit, who can speak to that? The question was, how often are there inspections of individual units, not the building, but individual
I can
units?
speak to it. I can speak to it. And then Angel, if you want to chime in. So the only time that individual units are inspected are at the point that a rental building is being sold.
Okay, and the reason that I'm asking is twofold. One is, I've talked about this before. This past fall, I did a project on rental housing in Skokie, and part of that was me just walking around trying to gauge if there was a difference in the condition of the buildings of people who were registered as landlords and people who were not registered as landlords, and I found that there was not. But I did see that a lot of these buildings on like Lehman and La Crosse between Dempster and Church are in really bad shape. Like they have ripped screens or cracked windows, the front door doesn't latch. So that's a safety concern, right? And some of the backs of them, the siding was coming off, like it's not in great shape. And so these are things you can see from the exterior. One of the tenants asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, oh, well, my landlord, we've been telling him that the lights in the hallway are not working. They're supposed to be motion activated, but they don't even turn on until you're practically in your own unit. And they've been telling him for months, and he never fixed it. And I have his address if you want it. I mean, not on me, but it's at home. And then a couple of years ago, there was an issue where some of the tenants were coming up and they addressed the board and they said, the cabinet doors are falling off and these other things, and my landlord won't fix them. And they're afraid to report their landlords, right? Michael Lord, even over milkshakes, said to me, tell them, come to me. And I went back to them and they said, we don't want to come to him. Yeah, it was actually milkshakes over at they said, we don't want to come to him because we're afraid of retaliation from our landlord if we file a complaint. So there might not be evictions, but that's maybe because the people realize, like, hey, my landlord is a total jerk and he'll kick me out of the unit if I complain. So I wanted to put that out there. And then through this project also, I talked to one of the landlords, and he was saying that aside from the fact that the landlord training was a waste of his time because he was a lawyer and he already knew it all, so that maybe you should have an exemption for lawyers. I told him about the cabinet doors thing, and he said, well, as a landlord, I'm not obligated to make sure the cabinet doors are on. They don't have to have doors on the cabinets. And I was like, that's a weird thing, but I just want to share with you that this is a condition that some of these units are in, even though we have this program. So in theory, it sounds great, but in practice, it's not working as well. I see my time is up, so thank you.
Thank you. The common thread is more outreach to tenants. And I think there can be a lot of benefits from that, both specific to this program and even just from a community engagement aspect as we enter into our strategic plan in coming months. Be nice to have those folks involved as well. Trustee Levy.
So I think she brings up a really excellent point, which is retaliation and fear of retaliation. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we probably do need to consider, yes, if people are following this ordinance, the spirit of the ordinance, no problem. But we all know, we've all been in situations where we are afraid to speak up because we fear retaliation. We've all been victims of bullies, I'm sure, in our lives. And in terms of housing, that's a very significant and terrifying place to be. So I don't know that I have a question so much as to reiterate that point that we need to be thinking about how we can ensure tenant safety and figure out what are the pathways to safety if there is a fear of retaliation.
Thank you.
Can I respond?
Trustee
Yeah.
Schechter, sure.
I just want to, wearing my fair housing hat, but retaliation, that's a protected category, you know, federal, state, county, I think Skokie as well. So it may not necessarily prevent things, but it is something that, you know, tenants are protected, including protected if they're going to complain to a government body.
So that's where part of that education outreach comes in. Trustee Iverson, and then we're going to close the
And just
discussion.
Very quickly, Chief Barnes mentioned that, referred to the program as a resource. And I think really that's the answer. The more hands that are able to get to that resource, the more empowered tenants are going to feel.
Thank you, everyone. Great report, great discussion.
So items C, D, and E under my report this evening were approved during the consent agenda. Item F is a request for closed session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C5 and C6 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act. A closed session is requested and to adjourn therefrom.
A motion is in order to go into a closed session pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C5 and C6 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act. Moved by Trustee Lissa Levy, second by Trustee Kamani Levy. Any comments or discussion from the board? Any comments or discussion from the audience? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce-Lovan.
Aye.
Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
And the motion passes. Thank you, John. Next item is the report of our Corporation Counsel, Barbara Mangler.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees, everybody. Items A and B have already been adopted with the passage of the consent agenda previously this meeting. Item C, this is an ordinance that will establish the compensation for the village manager, the deputy village clerk, the corporation counsel, and the assistant corporation counsels pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 3 of the Skokie Village Code. This ordinance is consistent with the mayor and board of trustees' direction during the budget planning for the fiscal year 2026 village budget, including approval of cost of living adjustments, COLA, equity adjustments for all village non-union employees, and one positional salary adjustment. This is up for first reading tonight. Second reading will be on the June 16th, 2025 agenda. And that
Any discussion, questions? Thank you.
That-
I'm sorry.
that concludes my report.
Thank you. No unfinished business. Under new business, in the packet was a memo from me to all of you about the process, the next step in our process to appoint either a new individual as corporation counsel or to look at hiring a firm to serve in that role, in which we would have a hybrid system, continuing to utilize the assistants corporation counsel who are in the office, and then to utilize an outside firm as the corporation counsel. Are there any, my recommendation is that we should look at both of those tracks and pursue both of those tracks simultaneously. There will be a panel put together of the village manager, 2 department directors of his choosing, 2 attorneys from the community, and there will be an application process with specific criteria for that, and then an outside attorney with municipal legal experience who will serve on the panel that will review both the initial resumes of individual applicants and make those initial interviews, and do the same with firms that apply on that parallel track, and then recommend finalists for each to us, and we will then do the second interviews together as a group in closed session, as is allowed by state law. That is my recommendation. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Trustee Schechter.
Just have a question about this idea of a hybrid situation, because in this chart that was included in the packet that showed other communities, there's almost none of them that do that. I'm just curious as to your thought on that.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. I looked at the chart, and I believe that if it was a contract, that is considered more of a hybrid, that there is somebody there, and then there is a contract of a firm. That's how I looked at it, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, there's a lot of information trying to be boiled down to a digestible format. And so the chart does compare the hybrid. It's really hybrid in that first item about cost is the hybrid model. Legal services for the village are more than what is listed there. It's just for that kind of one responsibility that we're talking about. And then the same for the contractual law firm. That is the amount for kind of that one role. And so, but the chart is then laid out on the advantages or disadvantages of the different format or the different approach. And then at the bottom, of course, the most recent community that is a hybrid is Oak Park. Within the last year, they had a vacancy in their corporation council. They filled that primary position with a firm, and then the attorneys that were on staff continue to be on staff. And so that's how the first box of the chart is laid out, and then the benefits and disadvantages of each model are then following, and then Oak Park is at the bottom as a hybrid.
Hoffman Estates also has looks like they have a hybrid system. Trustee Pierce Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I support your recommendations and how you would like to tackle or look at the situation, and I support the model that you presented to us.
Thank you, Trustee Pierce Sullivan. Any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the audience? Okay.
Is this the 30 minutes? Can I make one comment?
Yeah, I was just going to draw this to a close, and then it's you. No, it's fine. Thank you. We will proceed as outlined, and stay tuned. Again, this is not going to be a quick process. The goal is to have a decision and either a new corporation council or a firm in place for the hybrid model before the, no later than the end of the calendar year 2025. So thank you. Trustee Pierce Sullivan.
Forgive me for being out of order, Mayor.
No, you're fine.
My one comment is, according to the FBI, Jews make up 2% of the U.S. population. However, 68% of all reported religious-based hate crimes are against the Jewish community. Especially following this last recent attack in Colorado, which preceded a Jewish holiday, the Jewish community is probably at an all-time fear. But I want to take this opportunity to recognize Chief Jesse Barnes and our police department, because during the story, while it was unfolding and I was receiving phone calls from the community as we were getting ready to go to the synagogue, I was able to say that I spoke to the chief, and that already the Skokie Police was quite aware that we were in a very complicated situation because it's fear of the unknown. And I want to thank you for being responsive. I want to thank your officers for being sensitive to this situation and for allowing Skokie residents to continue to feel safe in this community. So thank you.
Thank you for expressing that, Trustee Pierce Sullivan. This is a hard time. It's a hard time, and our heart goes out to those in our community who feel threatened and unsafe, and we want everyone to feel welcome and safe here, and we'll continue to work hard for that. Thank you to our police. Okay, is there anyone else who would like, we're in our final public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the village board for 3 minutes? Okay, hearing none, seeing no one jumping up. A motion is in order to adjourn to closed session, and this public meeting will automatically and immediately adjourn without the conduct of any further business or comments. Is there a motion to concur? Trustee Pierce Slovan, is there a second? Trustee Lissa Levy. Any questions or comments? If not, will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Lissa Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Pierce Slovan.
Aye.
Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson. Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
The motion passed, and we are adjourned.